The next couple of weeks, we're going to be doing what we're calling a Leaders Share. So we want to have each of our leaders, we have 10 leaders in different departments who have been so faithful and so wonderful about leading us all in our faith. And it's so important. So the thing about leadership is it's sometimes hard. And I was meeting with a pastor just recently, this past week, a pastor from Vox Church, and we sat down. I was like, man, I'm so glad we get to catch up. And I said, because ministry is, and he said, a lot of pain. And sometimes there's a lot of pain with leadership. Criticism often comes way before the praise. Criticism often comes way before the praise. But if you're patient enough, the praise is going to come. And the praise will stick. And not everything that's said to you that you think is criticism. Sometimes you just need to hear it. But if you're patient, the criticism turns into something that actually lasts a lot longer. And we're not here for our own honor. We're here for the honor of God, that he would be glorified and lifted up. So I'm going to introduce in a minute the four of our leaders today, and then we're going to be doing that again next week. And I just want to read to you something that I want to make sure our leaders heard first. It's a simple prayer of mine that I want to share with all of you. And what I wrote to them was this: we really are stepping into not only a new season at Castle, but more like a new era. It's important we reset. I feel so deeply that we will all share this together, which we did. And this is what I said: my prayer for myself is what I pray for each of you and encourage you to consider this prayer. With leadership comes pain, but help me to remember the privilege. With leadership comes sacrifice, but help me to remember that it's not just about me. Lord, meet my needs as they are important to you, but help me to remember that sometimes my preferences and my wants and my frustrations need to give way to what's best for the church. Refresh my vision. Give me a soft, teachable heart. Give grace so that I may outdo others in honoring them, even as I trust you to honor me. Expand my heart to be generous like you are. May I give more than I expect to receive. May I see people as your children made in your image, respecting the least of these like I would those held in high esteem. And lead me by your Spirit. Amen. So it's not just for us either. It's for all of us. This is not just about leaders. We're going to share something so personal. It's not about the rest of us. It's actually something that we can learn. And I can say for myself that I wouldn't be standing here today if it wasn't for the leaders I'm surrounded by. And like Miguel's prayer, that's why it spoke to me. My prayer is, Lord, lead me to people who can help me with my walk. And I believe that he answered that prayer with the people that are on the platform. And so we're going to go in Jamie. It's just like you guys are already organized. That's why you guys are leaders. So I'm going to introduce just real briefly. Jamie is our worship director and somebody who said, I'm fighting to get here. Nothing's going to stop me despite the pain and everything else you've had these last couple of weeks. You were determined to get here. You got here. We're so grateful that you're with us. Celeste is our community liaison. I can't think of anybody better to do that job. She says so often, you got to know your people. She knows her people. She said to me today, when her finger goes like that, you need to help. You need to get some people to delegate this to. And I was like, yes, I guess I will. Heather, a close friend of mine, she's leading women's ministry. She's just led beautifully, deeply rooted, a Bible study for both the men and the women, and it was amazing, amazing. Danielle, our executive pastor, who was probably the one to say, this is where you guys should sit. Danielle's the one who yesterday, when we were doing the sneakers and we were handing out the sneakers, at one point, Heather said to me, is this why you normally have Danielle? I was like, thank you for the backhanded compliment, but yes, Danielle would have us in shape. And from youth group days till now, such a tremendous influence in my life and so many of our lives. So starting with Jamie, we appreciate you.
5 years, my gosh, what a ride. The amount of change that has taken place since 2019 is astounding. Changes in our world, changes in our country, our state, politically, economically, like the pandemic, like there's so many things that have changed. But if there's one thing that remains true, it's the Word of God that says in Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 8 that Jesus Christ is the same God yesterday, today, and forever. So no matter what changes are taking place all around us, God remains the same. There's another verse in Malachi chapter 3 and verse 6 that says, I am the Lord and I do not change. That is very comforting. So while everything around us is changing and can change, we can depend on God to continually show us his grace and his love and compassion. And for me personally, church planting and taking on the role of worship director in a new setting and a new church culture challenged my ideas of what church was and what worship had always been to me. But it challenged me in all the right ways. And as Adam began to set the tone and the culture for this church, under the leading of the Holy Spirit and also with the help of close confidants and friends, as he was setting that tone, many of us were coming out of a church situation that we needed healing from. It was a time of learning and unlearning. And during this time, though it was difficult, I have seen God's mercy, his patience. I've seen how long-suffering he is with me while I navigated some really rough waters and sought his help to bring me into a new era spiritually. And he's still moving me. He's still challenging me. And he's challenging me to believe for more and to be more. In my opinion, one of the greatest miracles that God can do is to change the human heart. Over the last 5 years, I was just talking to my friend Ria about this before the service started. Over the last 5 years, God has replaced my feelings of inadequacy, never good enough, with the strong belief that I am worthy and I am capable because of Jesus and the work he did on the cross. He's helped me learn that mistakes are lessons from which I can learn, not a life sentence by which I am imprisoned. Guilt has no hold on me anymore. And that is truly a work that only God can do. And this healing in my heart has continued as we were starting to get the church up and running. And this is what's such something that really just opened my eyes over the last couple of weeks as I've been thinking about what I'm going to say. The more I saw what God was building here, the more my heart healed. As I looked around and I sensed what God was asking us to do and to be in the city of Norwich, I just knew that we were moving in the right direction. I had been in church since infancy, yet while I was watching Castle unfold, I was looking around and I was thinking, this is it. This is what has been missing. This is the heart of God, and this is how church is supposed to be. And as I began to learn what Adam's vision for worship was in general in Castle and to lead the worship, I was so grateful to be able to use the gifts that God has given me in an environment where I am protected, I'm safe, and I'm loved and valued. And not just loved and valued for whatever talents or gifts I may or may not have, loved and valued because I am who I am, loved and valued for who I am and no other reason. And as we began with the worship here, we had a core group of people who served together week after week, and most of the team not taking a Sunday off to sit in the congregation and just be in God's presence. And I knew we needed more people in order to take some of the burden off those people who were serving week after week. So we just began to pray that God would send us the right people for Castle Worship at the right time. And God has answered that prayer. When we first started out, I think we had like one person per instrument, maybe two, depending on what instrument it was. Guys, we now have 4 drummers. Well, 3, yeah. We have 3 that are on the schedule every quarter. Jono drums, but he's mainly there in case like the world is coming to an end and the other 3 can't be here. So, because he does so many other things. So we have 4 drummers, which is awesome. We have a total of 12 singers. We have 3 people who play guitar, 3 people who play bass guitar, 5 people who can play keyboards. Don't get me wrong, we could always use more because all these people serve on other serve teams and it makes it very tricky. But God continues to just give grace upon grace. And I know he's going to continue to send us the right people at the right time as we keep seeking him. So Castle Worship has also seen incredible provision financially over the last 5 years. As a church body, as we have been faithful with our giving and been diligent with that, the Lord has blessed us, and we've been able as a church to pay off debts that we had from 5 years ago when we did the building project, and we had all this debt, tens of thousands of dollars, and we've been able, as we've been diligent to give, God has been faithful to our diligence. And those accrued debts have been paid off. Castle Worship has also reaped the benefits of grants that were awarded to us to help us pay for much needed equipment, software, things to make our lives a whole lot better and a whole lot easier. God has been so faithful. And when I look back on all God has done, not just for the worship team, but for me personally, I can't help but become super emotional because the goodness of God just does that to me. His goodness and his faithfulness is unfathomable.
If I pass out, somebody catch me. I'm like, I'm doing what? Hi, good morning once again. I'm Celeste Warner, Board of Trustee member and also Community Engagement Lead. I'm going to be talking about, it's not that big? Okay. I'll just speak up. All right, so I'm going to be talking about from the perspective of hospitality. When I first met with Adam a while back, we sat down and talked about, being on the Board of Trustees, what that would mean, and about being the hospitality director, which I was at the time. That encompassed inside of Castle as well as the community stuff. And eventually we broke it off, and my daughter, Rainey, took over the director of hospitality part so I can focus strictly on community engagement. So today I'm going to talk about how God has moved in all of it and how he's helped us to grow and reach toward the mission and vision that God himself showed to Adam. And what he has bestowed upon Adam is an extension to us as well. And we can take a look at that. So this, like I said, the plan was first drafted in my first days of leadership. He showed me how he was going to use the vision internally and externally. And this is just like, he showed me what Castle could look like. So I wrote this plan and I gave it to Adam, and he was like, whoa, this is long. This is like big. And I'm like, when I tell you what I have here, you can envision for yourself how much of it has already happened, right? So we'll look at that. So I truly didn't know what to expect when Castle first started, but I knew it would be great because I knew the person at the helm, Pastor Adam Bowles, that he had a burden in our heart to reach people, like really, really reach people. I know that he would do it all with all the care and the diligence that God had put upon him to do it. And I call it our humble beginnings. And in that, we know that it would be based upon God's will and his way first for all of our lives and the lives we're going to touch. So, like I said, when I sat down with Adam, I was thinking, he said, think about it, between the director part and the trustee part. He was like, think about it. You don't have to give me an answer right now. So if you know Adam, he would say, no obligation, no response required right now. And he would mean it. Like, to this day, he would say, no pressure, no pressure. And if he hasn't grabbed you yet, he'll grab you, and he'll tell you. The first thing he'll tell you, no pressure, no pressure. You don't have to commit to anything. But I just knew it's something that I wanted to be a part of, and I could not wait to begin the role. So as we spoke about leadership and the importance of being leadership, and he wanted to have leaders who had the type of burden that he would have. And we see that. We see that in everything that we do, everything that Castle touches, and it's been amazing. So after about the first year or so, a little over a year after that meeting, and a surprising pandemic that we didn't expect, we started to see things alter, things speed up. Like, for example, I remember talking to Adam about going online, and he was like, not yet, down the line. What happened? Within months, we were online, right? We started with a building with short funds coming up short. We knew that the building wasn't a typical church, so people were like, this is a church, this house is going to be a church. We weren't as fully welcomed downtown. And so those were really humble beginning. And I call it the classic story, unfortunately, of who are you, where are you from, what do you want to do here? Like, this is what you see, right? But Jesus loved the multitudes, and he was around everyone, and we knew we wanted to be that, right? We knew that there's always enough love of Jesus' kind, and it was more than enough to go around. So when we read about Jesus, right, we wanted to treat people the way that he did, and we should always remember his response in Matthew 25:45. Truly I tell you, whatever you do not do for one of the least of these, you do not do for me. So when I look at the plan, because that was my job to reflect on 5 years ago with the plan and what it looks like now, and I look at how God has shown me, what he's shown me, how he's grown me, how he continues to use me, and how he's changing me through it all as well. And like my anxiety, anybody knows me, my biggest fear is public speaking. So there you go. But when I look at the plan, and like when I reflect on it on myself, like I knew the plan, right? But it's been a while. I looked at it, and I looked at it and for this, and I'm like, oh, wow. There was a culinary team in there, go Celia, and we know how much potlucks and picnics and women brunches and all this stuff that we get to do. There was a communication team. We get the awesome text messages and everything that goes out. Health and wellness team, right? We see the mental health formats that we're doing right now. A community courtyard team is on my list, right? We started to see what we're doing in Jubilee Park right now. This is all of day one before this church even really broke ground of what God showed me that this church could be. A visitor team that include merchandise, got it right there. Prayer ministry, we see that, we have that. Yeah, there's a lot of areas that we need to grow in and a lot of other parts that we want to really expand on and be excellent in God with it, but we have seen so much already. Attendee relations, Castle reaching out into the community, like this is like growing. I call it the ultimate church servicing experience, and we're growing, we're getting there. I'm looking forward to seeing even more of that. So when I look at encompassing what I've seen so far that God has been doing, the lessons learned, and the way he has used all of it, I think of the community aspect first. Well, first, because I leave the best one for last. But first, the community aspect. What started off as prayers to engage in our local community has turned into heartfelt, beautiful bonded partnerships beyond our wildest imagination, like the city, the state, the healthcare system, financial institutions, to name a few, like who knew, right? Things that people would say like, oh, that's impossible. Like, what do you think you're doing? Where are you going, right? We have gained major supports and supporters from some of the most unlikely avenues, and we have created extended family and partnerships. Like when I meet with the folks that we do partnerships with, I don't call them partners, I call them family, because that's what they've become to us. And the most important part is the human aspect of all of this, right? At Castle, we strive to reach radical hospitality, and we want to reach levels to meet others on the streets when we open our doors and we welcome everyone in. Now, it doesn't mean that we're standing at the door just smiling and showing our faces off. It means allowing each person who enters the door to feel surrounded by the fullest love of God, for the love of Christ. It's for them and for us too to feel completely drenched in the goodness of God. It's in our approach to greeting, to engaging, to supporting and remembering folks. So I ask you to pray, as you continue to pray for our hospitality as a whole and everything that encompasses. Pray with me that we are so much more than that handshake at the door. Pray with me that as individuals and as a church body, that we are seeking to show more of that amazing love of Christ through all of us, not just one or two people, but all of us, and that we continue to leave an everlasting generational impact. I want to have that impact as well. I want to meet every single person that I encounter. I want to know their name. I want to be part of every single milestone that God is leading us through here to Castle to reach people. I want to know that every personal life that impact touches, that it reaches the city center, that it reaches the neighboring towns, that it reaches other regions, but it reaches each person in their own personal lives and in their homes. Right? So I ask you to remember to be humble. Be humble in what we all do together in this. Be humble by remembering who we are, who God is calling each of us, for me, you to be in him. Be humble in remembering who he is and reaching out to others. And remember to be dependent on, that he's depending on you and me to step up and be just even a little bit more of what we're currently doing right now. Yeah. So in the end, if you don't know where to begin, just ask God to help you, to show you where you want to serve, where you should be serving and how you should be serving. And it should be something that's not done out of obligation, like Adam says. It should be something from the heart that really, I have a burden for this. And as many of us here as leaders, and for Adam and Danielle especially, Rainey, you can speak to people and you can let them know, hey, I've been always meaning to do this. I've been always to do that. Sometimes you think like you're not good enough for anything. God uses everyone, right? So the reality of, I say, think of the word hospitality. I broke it down in my own definition. It's the reality of what needs tending, mending, the purest of love and care, right? So as we're caring for someone else, remember to be a sound listening ear, no judgment. Remember to be that one, because what do we say? I'm your second, right? Remember to be the one who truly cares, and that in your deepest heart, that you know that you're here for them and their pain. Amen. And remember, most of all, be Christ-like with love for another person.
Okay, so I'm so grateful to be part of Castle family. We truly are a family. It's beautiful. And I can't believe we're at 5 years. It seems like it's like a million years, but yet 5 years. It's 5 years. It seems like a million years, and it's a flash in the pan. I could talk about many areas of personal growth, but I would like to focus on one that for me has been pivotal to the purpose God actually has for my life. My background has largely been in worship ministry. That's what before this church, that's what I did. And it's like a family thing too. And I've always been comfortable doing that. But after Castle opened, I began to feel like something was brewing inside of me. I began to feel like my purpose wasn't solely based in worship. I kept this inside and committed it to prayer. Time went on, but the feeling didn't leave. As Castle began to grow, there was a clear desire among women to have fellowship and connection. In my spirit, there was a voice that kept saying, lead the women. For quite a long time, I ignored it. I ignored it because that's not something that I thought I could do. I felt incapable, unqualified, and fearful of public speaking. I am an introvert and can be timid and shy, not at home. There came a point one day that I couldn't push the feeling down anymore. I made a decision that day to step out into that purpose. I spoke with Adam about it, and he was like, let's go. He didn't say it exactly like that, but That was the enthusiasm that I was met with. I stepped out into the scary. It seemed like walking into a dark hallway, but my trust was in God, and I knew that He had my hand. That was the beginning of the women's ministry here at Castle. What I have learned through this process and through this time is that His power is truly made perfect in our weaknesses. That's a verse in 2 Corinthians 12. Our weaknesses in God's hands are opportunities for our greatest redemption and often lead us into our true calling. I have been doing women's ministry now for a while, and I still feel nervous at every Bible study, every event. But I feel God's incredible grace. As I wrote the Bible study, Deeply Rooted, I spent a lot of time asking God to really bring me into my full calling. I was doing a lot of soul searching and began to see the labels that I had put on myself that were holding me back from my full potential. In one of those moments, I told God that I feel like a turtle who hides in their shell all the time. Have you ever felt like a turtle? Is it just me? Louisa does. Louisa, I don't see you as a turtle. It was in that moment that I felt God say to me, "You are a roaring lioness." I was completely mind blown because that's the way that God sees me. You see, God sees what He calls us to be. He's not deterred one bit by our silly labels that we place on ourselves or any area of weakness that we have. God lovingly calls us to more. He knows how to guide our steps as we give Him our lives. He will tailor our path from weakness to strength. He is an expert at making the weak strong. I see that happening in the women's ministry. I see the fruit that is blossoming. It has become a truly safe space for women to be vulnerable. We have camaraderie, and that is powerful. Best of all, there is a hunger for God and spiritual growth. I see this happening at Castle as a whole as well. We have come a long way in 5 years, and I give God every ounce of the glory. And I'm looking forward to see what God has for us in the next 5 years.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Danielle. I'm the executive pastor. I think I said that earlier, but it's important for my reflection here. And I am going to try not to preach a whole message at you. It's going to be hard, but I'm going to do my best. So for my reflection, I'd kind of like to take us back to before Castle was ever here, before the doors ever opened, before we even knew we were going to come into this place. And when we were getting ready to establish Castle, Adam had set up what were essentially brainstorming sessions at the Duncan in Taffville. And so groups of us all crammed into the co-working space they had there, and we were taking time to talk about what were the values of this new church. What did we want for this new church? What would our roles be in this new church? What goals did we have before it was ever Castle Church, right? This is the very conception of it all. And so pause on that story, right? So there have been 2 times in my life where I felt like God spoke to me and moved me to action when I really didn't want to. The first is actually when I got baptized. I didn't think I was ready to get baptized. I spent a long time being like, I'm not good enough. I'm not there yet. I need to do more work on myself, right? Those are all false things, but that's what was in my head. And I also don't like public speaking, or I didn't. God has a funny, ironic way of putting us into things that we don't like to do. So now I'm fine with it. But I didn't like public speaking. I knew I was going to have to give a testimony when I got baptized. I was just like, I'm just fine here. Like, I love Jesus. I don't need to do that. And then one day we were having a baptism the next day, and I just felt like God pushed me to say, you need to take this step. You can't keep living on the edges of decision and on the edges of commitment. I need you to take this next step for what I have next for you. And I called Adam. Oddly enough, Adam is central to both these stories. I called Adam and I said, I think I have to get baptized tomorrow. I was not into it, but I was like, I feel like I have to, so let's just do it. The second is the time this has happened to me is leaving these co-working sessions. So at that time, I was a very content member of the worship team. I played the violin for about 10 years with Jamie on her worship team and about 2 years of piano at this point. And I was very, very happy doing that. I really liked worship. I really liked being able to add to the service in that way. There was a lot of satisfaction I got from being able to bring my worship in an instrumental way, right? And I really liked that. I felt like I was good at it. I felt like I'd grown so much in it. But we left these co-working sessions and I pulled Adam aside in the parking lot of Dunkin'. I said, hey, come here. I said, I think I have to step back from the worship team. And we talked about it a little and I said, I just feel like God is calling me into a new place, into a new role for this new church of organization and administration and preparation to lay a solid foundation for what Castle will become. And I can't do that the way God's calling me to do it if I don't step back from this other thing, right? Do you know sometimes God calls us from the things that we like and we're good at? He says, I've got a new season for you for something that you feel uncomfortable with and you're not ready to do, but I see I gave you the skills. So I need you to leave the thing that you like sometimes and come over here to this other thing to step out into something new. And that's what God did for me in that moment. And so I took that step and I want to share 2 stories from the Bible briefly with you that I kind of have gone back to as I've relearned what order and preparation meant to God, right? I came from a church background that kind of really stigmatized planning and order, I felt like. When I have a natural ability to plan and to organize, and I felt like I was constantly having to push those parts of myself down because that other church told me that was confrontational to the Holy Spirit moving, right? Have you ever heard this in church before? If you plan too much, God won't move. And I felt like I was constantly having to take these pieces that wanted to be like, well, what's the plan actually? Are we just showing up kind of rolling with it today at 9:15 on a Sunday, right? But I constantly have to like put that to the side because people will be like, that's wrong. You shouldn't ask the why and the how and have an actual thoughtful plan on how you approach God. You should just like wing it, right? I find that kind of approach, you do church however you want to, but I find that kind of approach often precipitates like a fly by the seat of your pants kind of ministry, like, we're going to show up and it's 9:30 and I don't know, let's see what's going to happen today. And that's what I came from. And I had to kind of relearn for myself, what does God say about this? Is this wrong? Is this not? Are pieces of my personality that God built me with wrong? Why? So there's 2 pieces of the Bible that I've really turned to in the last 5 years that have helped me kind of relearn and regrow this, and that ultimately became the building blocks for what Castle is. And the first is Joseph. So if you don't know Joseph, his story's in Genesis. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. Joseph's brothers, they put him in a hole. They sold him into slavery because they were jealous of him. Then he got falsely accused of assaulting a woman. He got thrown into prison, right? Joseph's getting really the short end of the stick here a lot. Then Pharaoh's having some dreams. He can't figure out what they mean. So Pharaoh calls Joseph from the prison and says, Joseph, what does this mean? And Joseph says, hey, I've got some news. Egypt's going to have 7 years of excess, and then they're going to have 7 years of famine. And so my plan would be that we hold some of the excess back so that we can feed people in the famine. And I like to imagine, right, Pharaoh was like, that's a good plan, man. You're in charge of that. You go do that. Good luck for the next 14 years. So I like to imagine, right, Joseph got a clipboard. I like to imagine, even though he probably had a stone, but like, I like to imagine he got a clipboard. He was doing some calculating. This wasn't like a loosey-goosey plan. Joseph didn't make a 14-year plan to feed people through 7 years of famine being like, I don't know, like when the grain trucks go by, like grab a handful, maybe throw it in the car. I guess that's good enough. That'll feed us for 7 years, right? No, Joseph got a clipboard out and he was calculating. He was doing some real planning. He was doing some instructing. Joseph had a real plan and he followed it. But I like to relate to Joseph in a kind of between the lines way. The Bible doesn't tell us that Joseph was pressured, But as a person who has had to do a lot of risk-averse assessments and planning and policy that no one really cares about until it goes wrong, right? No one cares about all the policies this church has that keep us safe until something goes wrong, and then you all care. And so a lot of times when you're that person, when you're the Joseph who's planning for the thing that's on the horizon but no one sees, there's a lot of pressure that comes with that from people being like, yo, chill out, man. Nothing is going wrong. There's been 5 years of plenty. There's so much excess. Why are you taking my extra, Joseph? You're basing this all on Pharaoh's weird dream. Maybe he ate something weird that night and had weird dreams. Like, stop with all of your extraness right now. And I have to imagine Joseph at least one point faced that in his life of people being like, really? We're doing all of this because of some dream? But Joseph stuck to the plan, right? Joseph stuck to the plan because he knew what could happen in the future. He knew that God had given him a plan and a vision for what was to come, and he stuck to it through 7 years. 7 years is a long time, right? 7 years, he was like, I really believe there's going to be a famine. I'm going to keep this plan going. And so even in the early days of Castle, right, when we were changing culture and changing mindset, I myself faced times of judgment, right, where people were like, do we really need that much of a plan? Do we really need these policies? Do we really need consistency? Do we really need all of this? Yes. Yes is the answer. You do. Because it's what keeps your church going. It's what lays a good foundation. It's what keeps people safe. It's what safeguards those in leadership and those in the congregation. You need it to prepare. You need it for the time of famine, right? When everything's good, you don't see those pieces. But when the famine hits, all of a sudden you care that someone walked around with a clipboard and put some safeguards in place. Thank you, Joseph. The second thing that I really like to reflect upon is when they built the tabernacle in Exodus. And if you look in this chapter, there's all these specifications that God gives Moses. And it's not like he's like, I don't know, Moses, go build a tabernacle, make it big, lots of space, holy stuff. It's time for tabernacle things, go build that. He's like, this is how big I want the curtains. This is how many curtains I want. This is how many loops I want on the curtains. This is how I want the lampstands decorated, right? It's like 10 chapters of really specific specifications. So one, God cares about the plan, right? If he didn't, he would have been like, I don't know, build a big room where people can come. That'll be good enough, right? Nope. He said, let's get the plan together and then we're going to do it right. We're going to do this right. But God also says to Moses that he has picked a master craftsman to see it through. He tells him who it is, and he's picked an assistant. And he says to them, I have moved them with the Spirit and given them the skill and knowledge and wisdom to oversee this project. It says he moved them before they ever picked up a tool, right? He filled them with his Spirit. God doesn't have to come to us at 9:25 on a Sunday. He's not a surprise God. It's not like, hey, God, what do you want to do for songs today? And he's like, wouldn't you like to know? I'll tell you 9:25 on Sunday. Like, no, he's not a surprise kind of God. You can actually meet him in the preparation. God can move in the preparation. He is an omnipresent God. He sees all of time. And if you say, hey, God, what do you want to do Sunday? On Monday, you could actually ask him that, right, for the next Sunday. You can actually say, hey, God, what do you want to do this Sunday? I'm gonna be in prayer. I want your Spirit to move in me in the preparation. And he'll actually come and he'll answer that question. And there is a time and a place, right, for openness and God to move and freedom. There's a time for that. But when we constantly move like that in our lives, that's not moving with the spirit of preparation and purpose and excellence that God has showed us time and time and time again in the Bible is how he moves in his holy places, right? And so God says, I've given these people, and then he goes on to say, and all of the skilled craftsmen who will come, and he picks out, it says his Spirit moves in those who were skilled and willing. They moved in the people who were experts in their areas to come and do work for God, to do it well and to do it perfectly, right? And then God tells Moses, when the work is done, my Spirit will move. When you do the thing I told you to do, and you do it, it says, according to my plan, when you do it well and you follow the details, I will be there. Right? And that is such a lesson that I've taken in the last 5 years as I've rebuilt what does order mean to God? That there is holiness in doing things well. There is holiness in being careful and thoughtful and caring with how do we organize things? How do we care for this church on the back end of stuff? So much of what I do is really unseen, right? You all see me here, see me running around. Some of you see me stressed sometimes. But ultimately, a lot of what I do is background. No one sees it until something goes wrong, and then it matters. And so it's all of that care in the details, and it's not wrong. It's not contrary to God's Spirit. It is God's Spirit. God's Spirit is, I come in order and purpose. God didn't create the world by being like, we'll slap some things together to be good. Like, there is care and purpose in even how your DNA is created. If it wasn't all purposeful, you wouldn't exist, right? This is a God of order. And so these last 5 years have really been about building up that foundation and building care into everything we do, right? Jamie's praying during the week. God, what do you want to do on Sunday? She's having that spirit of inviting God into the preparation. Heather's praying, what do the women need? Celeste is praying, what are the right community groups to reach out to at the right times, right? We're all doing that in our ministries of saying, God, be with us in the preparation. We want to do this right and according to your timing and your spirit and your will. And so it's been an amazing 5 years. We've seen so much growth in just doing things carefully and with thought. And I cannot wait to see what the next 5 years hold now that there is a steady foundation to stand upon that can take growth that God is going to give to Castle, I believe. Amen.
In the kingdom of light, in the kingdom of light, forever under your dominion. You're the king of my life, you're the king of my life. You reign above it all, you reign above it all, over the universe. Over every heart, there is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all. On the cross, the work was finished. God, you poured out your life just to give us new life. Jesus, you're alive. Oh, you reign above it all. You reign above it all. Over the universe and over every heart, there is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all. Let all of heaven and the earth erupt in song. Sing hallelujah to the everlasting one. There is no higher name. Jesus, you reign above it all. You reign above it all. You set the darkness running out of an empty grave. Seated alone in glory, enthroned on the highest praise. You set the darkness running it all. Let all of heaven and the earth erupt in song. Sing hallelujah to